Hello everyone, my name is Boulevard, and this is something like Tournament Tactician. So I debated not even making one of these for this event, but I like for the last 3 years I've been making this weekly tier list. You know, it's not always weekly, but it's mostly weekly, you know, like 95% of the time. But I've always done one for a big event. So I thought even though the timeline's nerf came in absolute last minute, which really throws off my schedule, right? Because ideally I want to get this to you on Wednesday, but if there is a nerf that's not going live until Tuesday morning, I'm not going to have enough information by Tuesday afternoon to shoot a video to get it to you by Wednesday. So when I'm shooting this now, it's currently 5 p.m. on Wednesday. Maybe I'll get this out Wednesday night. Maybe I'll get it out Thursday afternoon. I don't really know. But this is getting shot Wednesday night, which means we also still just, again, have very limited information when it comes to the timeline's nerf and how impactful that is going to be overall going into the meta. And the last thing I want to do is mislead anybody. So I don't think I'm going to say anything particularly out of the ordinary in this Tournament Tactician. I think I'm just going to try and give you the facts as they present themselves and keep opinions mostly out of it, or very heavily let you know when I will be giving something that is an opinion. The first opinion is that Timelines is going to be fine. It's still going to be a very good lineup. I don't know that you want to run triple. I don't know that you ever really wanted to run triple. I think double is fine. I think the Jax Vi is sort of the weak link because it has the least amount of early game removal, or at least sustainability through the early game, in that the Freljord version has the most healing. So if you're like if someone's trying to blitz you down early, which is like mostly what the Timeline's nerf does, right? Is it gives faster decks more opportunity to blitz you down in the early game, because if you open Timelines, you can't play Timelines and play a 2-drop. That's sort of like the big implication, right? So you should, in theory, be a little more susceptible to aggro. Freljord has the most healing. Bandle City has the most removal, because pretty much all of them are running Mystic Shot, Get Excited, but then Bandle City also gets Pokey Stick and Pie Toss. Freljord gets, you know, the 4/5 that heals you, as well as the other, I think it's like a 3-drop that heals you when you improvise, so like there's some residual healing in there. The Jax version doesn't really give you as much of that. Obviously, you're not getting any removal out of the Jax section of things. You know, maybe you can get a burst speed blocker with the Fix 'em Up or whatever the discard spell is called, but it's really, like, it is the weak link against aggro. The weakest link, rather. So I think Timelines is going to be fine overall. I think you're going to see relatively the same amount of Timelines that you would have seen without the nerf as you will with the nerf. That's opinion number one. Opinion number two is that you can't play control. And the reason for that is, one, Timelines is still going to be fine, and Timelines is just, like, way too difficult for control to deal with. Your damage-based removal isn't as effective. You're not really able to, like, Aftershock or Mystic Shot a lot of units that you usually would. You have to, like, commit Vengeance on way too many things, and then, because they're so heavy on Weapon Masters, you're kind of getting outgrinded even into the late game, because if they do find just, like, a random unit, they can throw a weapon on it, suddenly it's, like, 4 times as scary. It's a bit of an issue. And I just overall think that control is going to get, like, outpaced by the Bandle City version and out-talled by the Freljord version once, like, Ornn and Trundle come down, you know? Whereas, like, a Risu on 5 from the Bandle City version is probably still going to overwhelm a control player's resources. The other reason I don't think you can play control is Ryze and Seraphine. We've seen Seraphine shift, and it's kind of hard to say in tournament versus ladder where is the Seraphine meta going, but we're starting to see more and more of the Plaza Guardian Seraphine Samira. And you as a control player are not beating counterfeit copies Plaza Guardian, right? As like a Karma deck, right? Karma set is kind of what I'm thinking of as like my baseline for control. I don't think Karma set is living, even with Karma in play. I just don't think you have the tools to really deal with the Plaza Guardian. If they, like, you know, if they high roll you, they don't even have to wait until like that late in the game to kill you, right? They can like start pumping out those Plaza Guardians super early, and you're not pressuring them in any meaningful way. Set also isn't enough to like take out a Plaza Guardian on his own, and you don't have Mystic Shot because you're mostly Shadow Isle now. It's a whole mess. Obviously you can stall out, but I would say, like, for the most part, that's not really a position you want to be putting yourself in. And then Ryze, if you're not interacting with Ryze, which Spooky Karma really isn't, you're not making it to turn 10. Ryze will kill you on like 6 or 7. Now, how good is Ryze? It's got like a 50% win rate on ladder, which is really high for Ryze. And Timeline still has like a 60% win rate on ladder, but that I can only filter by the last 2 days, and like 2 days ago was like Monday afternoon, so we still didn't have the time hot fix for Timeline. So like, again, the data is very skewed, which is why it's impossible for me to come up here and like tell you that I have the format solved. I'm going to show you the tier list now with those caveats and kind of lightly walk you through it. But again, for the most part, like, there are just no stats. I'm going to talk you through the Mastering Runeterra tournament, which is the best that I can do. And I am basically just under the assumption that, like, Timelines is going to be completely fine. So there shouldn't be too much of a shift in the meta. That said, even if the meta isn't shifting in a big way because of timelines, this is still a very fresh format, and new decks are getting discovered by high Masters players every day of the week. Just yesterday, Drissoth, our most recent WCQ champion, came out with another version of like Zoe Fizz Elusive Aggro. There aren't going to be any stats on that deck. There aren't going to be any stats on pretty much anything, because we basically just got a whole new meta with the shift in timelines, but like, you know, it's hard to gauge the impact of it. I think the impact was very minor. But as far as the actual tournament meta goes, we had the Mastering Runeterra Open event happen last weekend. Obviously, it was won by Triple Timelines, but there were some other shifts. For example, Rise. Rise made it to the top 8 and the top 4, and both of those players lost to the same triple burn player. Had they made it to the finals, who knows? We actually do, because the next day, ABG ran a single elimination format tournament where Pat, one of the top 8 Rise players, actually came in and won with Rise, Aphelios Victor, and Yasuo Katarina. Now, Yasuo Katarina I probably wouldn't put on the tier list. Aphelios Victor actually is what I've been playing on ladders, so I actually didn't realize that I forgot to slot that in there. I think that deck's quite good. It's not like, you know, anything crazy, but I do think it's a very solid deck, and I don't think you're going to be too upset to see it in like any lineup. I don't think it has any like glaringly bad matchups, because there's a lot of tech choices that you have in such a toolboxy deck as Aphelios Victor. And then obviously you've got the win condition of like the big Victor, the big Celestial, some Percival's back in there, things of that nature. Pat was meaning like Neandroid to go for a little bit more elusive damage and try to, you know, circumnavigate not drawing your champions in that regard. But I do think that Aphelios Victor definitely has a place in the meta and is a good, solid choice for just about any lineup. You know, it's a very good like third deck. Yasuo Katarina, I don't know about that one, Chief, but Rise I do think is kind of warping the upper end of the meta. Like I said, Rise and Seraphine just kind of have like an absolute stranglehold on the control meta right now, where you can either play the control Seraphine with Bandle City Piltover on, or you can play the sort of like anti-control version with the Plaza Guardians and Samira, like I was talking about. But for the most part, I still think like versions of Timelines, versions of Seraphine are tier 1. Thresh Nasus is probably still tier 1, just the flexibility of the deck. It didn't top the MR Open. Maybe it is past its prime. I think its ladder stats are still looking good, but like, who actually knows or really cares when it comes to that? But I think that Thresh Nasus definitely has the tools to like, you know, outpace Rise or out aggro the timelines, and I think you just kind of need to build accordingly. It's still certainly the best atrocity deck, I would say, and there's always something to be said for that, at least, right? I'm actually currently like trying to check on the stats for Thresh Nasus. I think it's still up there. Yeah, it's still at like a 53% win rate. So I still feel pretty okay with calling that tier 1. I think it's just like another very safe pick like the Aphelios Victor. Annie Jin, pair it with Sion, pair it with Poppy Ziggs, whatever. The one burn player that made it to the finals was actually, B was like running some weird shit. B was running like Fizz Samira with just full-on monkey, only like 9 followers, plus like a Piltover and Zon, Elise Teemo burn, and then Draven Sion, right? So like burn looks a little weird. We figured that was going to be the case. And then tier 3, we just kind of got like very specific counter picks. I'm not really in love with any of these options. I think like Overwhelm is probably one of the safer, like, yeah, you know, I just want to find a solid third deck. Like Overwhelm's solid. Overwhelm's always been solid. There's nothing, it's not doing anything new or crazy. Bone Club's just a good card. You know, you got Ruin Runner and the combos and all of that kind of thing. But for the most part, when I see Overwhelm, it's like Shurima Freljord. I think it's like, okay. This is probably actually pretty much everything in tier 3. The reason they're in tier 3 is, for the most part, I'm assuming that these are like specific niche counter picks to a certain kind of lineup. And ultimately, I want you to not really think about that for the first open. I think that you can kind of take a wait and see approach for the first Runeterra Open. See, you know, like watch how the tier 1, tier 2 decks, all the solid stuff kind of plays out. Get a better read on the meta, and then go for the counter picks in the second open if that's the route that you want to go, or top 32 or something. Like maybe these will have a higher presence in top 32, because I did think Azir Aurelia actually had a pretty good shot into the meta, and I don't really know where it went wrong. Maybe we're just overloaded on removal in the timelines. You're not able to like get down fast enough. They can remove your Azir and Aurelia too easily and like outpace your buff spells and your bounce spells. Who really knows? But for the most part, I really just want you to look at like the top end of the meta, the tier 1, the tier 2. Understand that like Rise, Seraphine are choke holding the late game. Timelines is kind of choke holding the early game and the mid game. And, you know, Burn has a way to get through that, especially with the timelines nerf. But that's like the biggest impact I expect to come out of a 2-mana timelines is like Burn gets a little more breathing room against you. But I still think that timelines is a perfectly fine sort of pick. Like if I was going to be playing this weekend, I would be playing Aphelios Victor. I would be playing probably Freljord timelines. And then I'm not super sold on a third deck. I don't love Thresh Nasus. Every time I've played Poppy Ziggs, I've been like, if I draw Poppy, I win. If I don't, I lose. Conservatory's not super my style, but maybe I would go Conservatory. Maybe I'd be like Timeline's Conservatory, Aphelios Victor, and just be like, hey, here are some solid decks. Can you answer these? Now, the problem with Conservatory is that, like, you are going to get out late game by, like, Ryze and Seraphine, and that is a risk that, you know, maybe last minute I'd audible onto one of the other decks. I've played a bit of Ryze. I didn't have a lot of success with it. I haven't played any of the Seraphine deck post-rotation, or post-Eternal Seraphine. I haven't played any Eternal Seraphine. That's how I want to say that. So, like, I'd still be looking for my third deck, but I'd be starting personally with Aphelios Victor and Timelines, and maybe I would even just go like Aphelios Victor double Timelines. But I don't think I'm gonna ball that hard. I think I would just stick with the Freljord version. I'm not really a Bandle City Timelines gamer, but just play it safe this weekend. Is probably the best way I can put it. Just play the solid decks, outplay your opponent, see where the meta settles, because we don't have a lot of information. If you think people are still gonna run Timelines and you had the answer for that, like Pat thinks you did, run it back. Go for it. I think you're still going to see a very high presence of Timelines. But that is the best that I can do for you, unfortunately, when we get into a hotfix nerf situation, and I still have to get this content out as quickly as possible. So thank you so much for watching. I've been Boulevard. Good luck in your tournaments. And I apologize for the sort of scuffed nature of this pre-event one, you know, not going as hard as I usually do. But again, like, the stats have kind of hit a reset button with the Timelines hotfix nerf. And, you know, it's happened before. Most famously at the WCQ for 2021, there was a bunch of nerfs to, like, Sivir Sean into Zero Aurelia, like, right before the WCQ, and I got a lot wrong, so I really don't want to stick my foot in my mouth. I'd rather play it safe on this one in the analysis, so that's what you get. Thank you so much for watching.